Hi, I'm Mollie from horticulture.co.uk, and today I'm joined by Kate Burtonwood, the head gardener at Trinity College, Oxford. Kate, do you want to explain a little bit about who you are and what you do?
As you said, I'm head gardener at Trinity College, which is one of the colleges that make up the University of Oxford. So I've been in this role for about 2.5 years, and prior to that, did a couple of other sort of head gardener and garden supervisor roles around the area where I live. So had a bit of sort of background into managing a garden before taking on one that's quite so prominent and historic and can be quite daunting at times. So yeah, interesting place to be.
Can you share with us what sparked your passion for horticulture and how that kind of led to you becoming a gardener?
Ultimately, it really was a desire to be outside, I think, and also to then have a job that was meaningful and connected in some way to nature. So while doing gardening in a sort of ornamental context isn't actually, the same as conservation work, and we all realize that, I believe you can still feel that responsibility to working ethically and sustainably within the environment, and to try and create something that boosts and helps nature while working in a garden. So having put that together, it seemed like a natural step to go into a sort of practical gardening role.
You had quite the career change. You transitioned from 15 years of working at a desk to horticulture. So what was the main motivation behind that shift?
So I came to realize after that quite long length of time that I just wasn't happy in an office. It wasn't that the people around me were, sort of doing anything wrong or bad, and it wasn't that the work wasn't actually quite interesting, but I just, like I said, didn't really like staying inside all day. I realized when I was staring out of the window, I'd rather be out in the rain, even if it was a bit sort of muddy and cold. Even now, even my team, they sort of laugh at me for being messy outside. I just kind of love not having to really care about that sort of thing anymore. I embarked on training and learning about gardening and horticulture. It was a small hobby for me, but it wasn't an overriding thing that I'd spent huge amounts of time doing. But I sort of learned about it and learned about careers in horticulture, and sort of forged a path that way.
Can you explain a little bit about your role as head gardener at Trinity College and what you kind of do there?
It's a really varied role, and I guess ironically, I'm not actually out in the garden all the time. So I'm currently sat in my office. I do have quite a lot of planning work and admin work to do, but I think given my background in office work, I feel I can manage that. And it's a trade-off for getting the time outside, the practical and the creative work that I do in the gardens, where I manage a team. I have three gardeners who work here. Some of whom have been here very long term, one of whom came to as an apprentice. So working together with them out in the gardens is great. They're an amazing sort of historic set of gardens that we have here. It's a place where there are areas which have been gardened since the 13th century. And what we feel we do is providing a green space for, stressed out people who are, they're working at the forefront of their field in academia and scientific study, and or they're studying here, at that sort of world class sort of pace as well. So providing a green space for them and occasionally doing activities for some well-being for the students is quite vital.
In addition to that, you've also got your own blog, The Cultivated Gardener. Can you kind of elaborate on the meaning behind that and how it influences your work?
I just find I love communicating to people about gardens and gardening, and a blog is a really lovely way to do it, because you can just put some information out there and people can find it when they want it, rather than sort of trying to organize and coordinate a load of people to come and listen at a particular time, look at what topic people want you to talk about, have a bit more freedom. I guess, I wanted to give a flavor of what I do as a professional gardener and how I got to where I am, but also give practical advice to people on gardening as well. So maybe aim both at people who are thinking about working in gardening and people who just look after their own garden as well. People really love, sort of receiving gardening tips. People always want information about gardens. I love that we are a nation of gardeners, and that's sort of such a keen interest for so many people living in the UK. I think I wanted to give people that understanding of sort of how I approach a garden, and sort of what's individual maybe about what I do.
What role do you believe a gardener plays in kind of the larger context of environmental stewardship and sustainability?
I think we're absolutely vital in that context. And often, if I can say, I think we're really underrated, and that's very sad. And we lose in favour of building contractors and architects who, sort of being contracted to lead on a project that might also involve landscapes and gardens. And because of how they're regarded, and because of how much they're being paid, almost they're viewed as the sort of expert, and they will come first and then the gardens. And it's a real shame. There's some really amazing practitioners in gardening and in landscape design who have so much to give, as you say, in terms of the sort of the environmental outlook of what a piece of land can be, what it can provide, and how we can build sustainability into design in cities, design where people live. I think stewardship is a really important word to use, and I think it should replace garden maintenance. Almost that sort of is a word that just gives an idea that what we are doing is some kind of routine thing, which just involves a few tools and sort of a job that doesn't involve looking after maybe what's going on. So it gives, I think, stewardship more of a sense of caring and understanding and sort of creating, looking after a green space. So yeah, I think gardeners should really be at the front of that.
What's your favourite season for gardening, and why is that season your favourite?
Well, you're asking me that on the most beautiful day of the year so far. It's a really crisp, sunny day here, and we've had a really sort of late season this year, but the trees are turning, so we've got quite a bit of colour. So I would say autumn, as you can probably hear from the things I've just said. And I think obviously, that the work in the garden is heavy going in this season. You get the cold, wet weather. A lot of what we're doing is digging, lifting. It's very hard work. But in this season, doing so much that transforms the garden, and it sort of carries forward all those hopes you have for spring, and the knowledge of all the bulbs you're planting, and the plants that you're dividing, and the new plants that you've sort of got in are going to be something glorious in a few months' time. And I really enjoy that.
Would you be able to walk us through the process of how you would go about improving a garden that's maybe a bit neglected and kind of transforming it?
I think that's sort of become a bit my bread and butter in various jobs I've done. And I think, as you were saying, sort of what was behind the ethos when I started my blog as well, of this sort of me standing in a garden and thinking, well, what am I doing? And like you said, it's about thinking about how you're transforming that garden. And I think my advice on that is to be brave with it. So do obviously, nurture well-established plants and things that you treasure within the garden. And, they will be having a great impact on the ecosystem you've got within your garden if you've got good, strong plants in there. But if something isn't working, remove it. Don't spend a long time worrying about it and thinking it through. If it's an old tired plant, if it doesn't work in its space, you can spend a really long time trying to prune it, shape it, make it work. And it'll actually just be impacting negatively on things around it as well. So I think, kind of be brave in making some big changes that might be stopping everything else from flourishing. I think the other part of it would be that, the process, it doesn't stop at planting. If you're thinking about your garden's sustainability, or you want a wilder garden, you actually need to keep tending. You need to keep editing the plants and making changes in addition. So if something, that you put in here isn't working, again, think about whether that's the right thing or whether you need to add something else. So yeah, it's about thinking through the years with gardening. It always is. And I think any gardener will say that to you, obviously. And the joy is in that long term rather than just feeling that instant impact for putting in some plants for one season.
In your opinion, what is the most kind of underappreciated aspect of horticulture that you kind of wish more people knew about?
I'd say it was the training and the skills. I think a lot of people don't realize that you can and should train to be in horticulture, whether that's really formal and involves the classroom or whether that's learning from somebody who is an expert and is passing on their knowledge in quite a structured way to you. I think it's just really important. And I think that education just isn't widely available. People aren't naturally sort of put towards it. So it's not really in front of you. It took me a long time to find it. At the point where even when I decided that's what I wanted to do, it sort of goes through a cycle in that the roles are then badly paid and we can't afford to train when we're working, or it just isn't viable for you to sort of spend those years training in order to take a job that isn't going to give you a particularly good wage, even if you hold the qualifications. And so you'll sort of start working because you need to keep the money coming in rather than being able to train. So I think I would love to see more of an acceptance that, horticulturists, people who work in the garden are actually a skilled trade, and see them valued.
How has the field of horticulture changed since you started your career, and where do you see it going in the future?
It's about having individuals who have that knowledge to do, I think we mentioned earlier, the stewardship, to fit into that environmental piece as well. And the idea of sustainable gardening, it's obviously not new. It's been sort of something that has existed in different forms for a very long time. But I think, that idea is becoming more widespread. And, even over the sort of 10 to 12 years that I've been in gardening, and that's a really good thing that people are starting to understand it. I think people are questioning even more the sort of central practices like lawn mowing or sort of using chemicals to enhance your garden, and that's a really good thing because that is what is going to help nature and bring wildlife back to gardens, which is actually vital for plant life to sustain as well. Recently, there's been a bit of kickback and a bit more debate about that idea of letting our gardens look wilder and what that means. And, sort of a certain group of, sort of type of gardeners have maybe spoken out against it, thinking, well, it's threatening the art of gardening and the idea that we should be keeping things tidy and keeping things neat. But I think people are beginning to understand how actually having that wilder, less formal look enhances, both nature, but it also has a really positive impact on individuals and places where they have grown large and, wild meadow areas.
Kate, what's next for you? Do you have any upcoming projects with Trinity College Gardens or anything that you're doing in your own gardening world?
We have a really, really big project coming up here to reinstate our main border area. So we had quite a lot of building work done on the site over the last few years, and there's been a lot of changes that we've already been through and a lot of areas we've already sort of worked on. But our main border area is about sort of 800 or 900 square meters. So, it's massive. It's sort of larger than most people's entire garden in one border. So that's going to happen in about sort of 18 months' time, once building work is done. And we're working with Chris Bircher on that. And I think, it's going to be quite an iconic project because of where it is, what we're doing with it as well. So, I think watch this space for Trinity Gardens in 2025.
And finally, is there anywhere our viewers can reach you if they want to get in touch and find out a little bit more about what you do?
Instagram is what I'm on most frequently, and I'm on there as Cultivated Gardener. So that's like the blog, or if you look for my name, Kate Burtonwood, it's pretty individual as well. So you'll find me, and that's probably the easiest place to find it. But also, I would say if anybody wants to visit Trinity College as well, they can sort of get in touch through the college. We can organise tours for groups on that. We have a garden season coming up in April, May next year, where we have a few talks and a few garden tours as well. So you can find the links to that through the Trinity College website too.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.